Welcome back to New Day. President Obama is deciding right now whether or not to provide military support to a struggling Iraqi government. The president has committed about 275 military personnel equipped for combat to help protect the embassy in Iraq. That's just so far. Joining us now to discuss the path forward, what the United States should do, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Mike Rogers, the congressman from Michigan. Mr. Chairman, it's great to see you this morning.
It's great to see you, and congratulations on your one-year anniversary of your show.
I thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. That's very kind of you. You have been talking, you, of course, are one of the point people that everyone wants to hear from when issues like this arise. I want to clarify a couple points with you. Do you think at this point, what you have seen, what you have heard, that U.S. airstrikes are necessary?
Well, I do think you have to have a coordinated effort to slow down the momentum and turn the momentum of what is an Al-Qaeda army on the rise and on the move. And so you have two places they operate, both Syria and in eastern Syria, western Iraq. And they're holding ground. They're gaining weapons. They're amassing cash. All of that's very, very dangerous. So I do believe that airstrikes should be a part of any option laid on the table in conjunction of pushing forward Iraqi troops back into this fight.
I've also seen you say that you do not support boots on the ground. But a big question right now is, how do you successfully target ISIS with airstrikes without boots on the ground, without eyes on the ground, because of how ISIS operates?
Well, and I think we should be very, very careful here. And I've heard this on the news, that the president is flip-flopping on this boots on the ground thing. We need a functioning number of troops for support in force protection, meaning protecting the embassy. When people say troops, boots on the ground, they're talking about big footprint, the 4th Infantry Division, the 101st Infantry Division, those kinds of things. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about large-scale troop movements. You will need trainers on the ground. You'll need intelligence officials on the ground to help guide the fight. Provide some command and control, so provide some training for certain forces on the ground, and to help best coordinate target packages, meaning where do they strike and when do they strike to have the most impact to slow down this Al-Qaeda army on the move.
Well, not a big footprint. How many military personnel do you think is needed for that to be accomplished?
Yeah, I wouldn't even hesitate. I would hesitate to even guess at that, Kate. But it needs to be robust enough to help the Iraqis move forward. But again, this is not a big target footprint that we want to put on the ground, or the United States would want to put on the ground, at least the way I would support it. I don't think the president has made any decision. The first movements I support. They actually put troops on the ground to protect the embassy. That's important. You've got to have that happen, and that, I think, has happened. And so the next step is, what does that package look like? And I think those discussions are ongoing now. I've had some discussions with the White House National Security Council staff, and I think a plan is coming together. I do believe that.
Can you give us any inkling of what that plan is?
Well, again, and I hate to get too far out there, I don't think any decision has been made.
What's your advice to the White House, then?
Well, listen, I would like to see two things. We need to have very aggressively re-engage the Arab League. I would not go into negotiations with Iran on this. Iran still has American blood on their hand from Iraq, and it's making our Arab League partners very, very nervous about this. Re-engage the Arab League. Have a two-pronged strategy. You need to disrupt their activities in eastern Syria, and you need to change the momentum in Iraq, and you need to have a political discussion all at the same time. Maliki really probably needs to go. We need somebody of serious stature to be able to tell them that, so that they can get a unity government to start taking away this Shia-Sunni problem that's developing, or is there already. But again, we have an Al-Qaeda armed insurgency group is on the rise. That is a problem for Iraq. It's also a problem for the United States and Europe. Thousands of people, we believe, with Western passports are on the ground, getting further radicalized, trained, and will go back home. That's dangerous for the United States, in the light that there has been an American who was used in a suicide bombing in eastern Syria.
I've heard you raise this concern about supporters of ISIS, of Al-Qaeda, with U.S. and Western passports. Are you confident that the United States has eyes on these people? Because the question is, wouldn't they be easy to track if they tried to re-enter the United States?
No, not necessarily. And so, again, we have some understanding of who they are. We don't have a complete understanding of who they are. Remember, it took, 19 people to kill 3,000 Americans. If you're talking thousands and you can track half of them, or 3/4 of them, or 80% of them, that still leaves a significant problem for us. That's why this rising problem, and we've known about this problem for about 2.5 years now, is so concerning for those of us who are worried about national security. And that's why you have to have an aggressive, disruptive campaign to stop the flow of those people into both Syria and Iraq. And then make sure that we can try to figure out who they are so that when they come back, we can stop them and take them into custody if that's what we need to do.
Mr. Chairman, we have heard some of your colleagues say that they believe that Syria and Iraq, with what's going on now, will likely become the next staging ground for the next 9/11. But you do wonder, is that bluster, or do you see real evidence of that? Because doesn't it also seem right now these guys are busy enough fighting and trying to kill each other and wage war over Middle East ground?
Well, something interesting happened here recently. So Zawahiri, who's the head of Al-Qaeda as we know it, the head leadership, ISIS was in eastern Syria and they were fighting with al-Nusra, another Al-Qaeda affiliate. And the argument then was Zawahiri, the leader who replaced Osama bin Laden, wanted ISIS to only fight in Iraq. And because ISIS was talking about external operations, meaning Western Europe and the United States. So think about that. They've already had those discussions. They understand the value of Western passport holders. They're weaponized very, very well now. Unfortunately, they've got a lot of money. So something interesting happened. Now they went back and are fighting in Iraq. It doesn't mean that they've lost their interest in these external operations. They are very aggressive and they're brutal. They've already issued Sharia law statements in Mosul and Tikrit and other towns. They've done summary executions. They've dragged people in the street and shot them in the back of the head. It's really important to understand who we're dealing with. These are very bad characters. They will not stop until they have their version of a caliphate, and they're willing to commit acts of violence to do it, including terrorist operations outside of Syria and outside of Iraq. That is what is so concerning.
And here is the hang-up. You have an American public that has no appetite for getting involved with another major military operation, getting involved with another war. The United States has left tons of equipment in Iraq, spent billions of dollars training the Iraqi army, paid for it with countless lives as well. But the troops, they've left their tanks, they've put down their equipment, they've walked away. They don't have the commitment to this fight that the United States wants them to have. How is anything short of a surge, which no one has an appetite for, how is there any possibility of having a real impact here?
Well, I think you can, and obviously we could go back and debate. I disagreed with the decision for a unilateral pullout of Iraq. I thought it was premature, it was dangerous, it was going to cause problems. Certainly has. But here's where we find ourselves. Now, this really is, people want to say this is a sectarian civil war, this is Shia versus Sunni. There's some of that, clearly, but this is an Al-Qaeda affiliate who is using violence to get its gains and has already talked about external operations.
So, Mr. Chairman, how do you get this Al-Qaeda affiliate to be back on its heels when what the problem is in Iraq is they need political reconciliation, and that does not seem like a likely outcome when you still have Prime Minister Maliki in power and you have decades, century-old tensions between these two religious sects?
Well, clearly, and if you ever want political reconciliation, you have to have some breathing space. Right now, you have Al-Qaeda knocking on the door of Baghdad. I mean, this is as bad as you can ever see it. You have to disrupt their ability to continue operations, they being ISIS, the Al-Qaeda affiliate group, in the way that they're doing it. If we don't disrupt that, if we don't give breathing space, you'll never get to the next question, which is how do we make sure we have political reconciliation between the Sunni and Shia factions in Iraq and the Kurds as well in the north. If we don't do the first part, you'll never get to the second part. And if you look back, we have a great history here, Kate. Look at what happened in Afghanistan. Everybody pulled out, said, that's it, we're done. The Taliban took over. It fostered Al-Qaeda, a safe haven like we've never seen. 9/11 happens. And so what we see here is all of the recipe is there. All of the ingredients are going in the stew, and we see it happening on our watch. Here's the trick, or here's the question, not the trick, is how can you disrupt it long enough to have Iraq do that political reconciliation, and get their army back in the fight. That's going to take a little bit of investment. It's not going to take huge military presence. It's not going to take huge amounts of sorties from an aircraft carrier every single day. It will take some of that to change the momentum. But it is in our national security interests. If you imagine a safe haven the size of Indiana, that's what they have right now, meaning they can train and recruit and finance. Some estimates as much as $1 billion in both cash and gold. That means they are well financed to do any operation in the world that they want to do. That is what's so concerning. We have to find a way to disrupt that activity very, very quickly. And this isn't a month-long project or 2 months or 6 months. We need to start that now. And you can also have political reconciliation going all at the same time.
That gets to my very final question. Real quick button on this, if you could. With all of this in mind and everything you know that you cannot talk about publicly, is it more likely than not that the U.S. will conduct airstrikes?
Well, I don't even want to say that. I mean, I think some options are being talked about that will provide for some disruption, and I'll support those options as long as they give breathing space to any political reconciliation, which means you're going to have to get the Iraqi military back in the fight, and that may include U.S. airstrikes to break the momentum of the al-Qaeda army. Congressman Mike Rogers, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. Mr. Chairman, it's always great to have you. Thank you for your time. Thanks, Kate.